Well, firstly, thank you very much for taking the time out to come and see a data governance session. I've had an amazing time here at the summit. I've really enjoyed the keynotes. I've seen some amazing things around AI. I'm particularly jealous of the Texas Rangers presentation with Jeannie. I thought that was very impressive. But one of my takeaways was for us to be able to do all this really amazing work in analytics on top of our data and with AI, everybody's saying that we need to get the data governance right. So I'm very happy to present to you today, and thanks for taking 40 minutes to spend with me. My name's John O'Brien. I'm a product manager with Shell. I work in our trading asset in Australia. You probably guessed that maybe from my accent. And for those that went to the Energy Forum on Tuesday, you would have heard our VP, Dan Jevons, speak about our overall strategy with Databricks and our relationship. And Bryce Bartman presented some of the contributions that we've made. And what I'd like to do is complement that rather than at the very top level. You can speak to Dan and Bryce, but I want to show you what happens on the ground. So in Australia, we've implemented the Databricks Lakehouse, and I want to share the story with you. And my aim would be to try to give you a couple of good takeaways. So if each of you in the room could come away with one tip or maybe an idea that you could leverage from us, that would be a big win for me. So for those not familiar with energy trading, we trade molecules, so gas to our customers, electricity, power, renewable electricity as a component of that, and also green products, so carbon offsets. And the scale of Shell allows us to be able to package that up and deliver that to customers. From the data side, it's an incredibly interesting place to work. So massive amounts of real-time data feeds coming through from the power system, from the weather market. And in terms of our business, all the people that I work with are data savvy. So our business has about 120 traders, risk experts, commercial staff in Australia, and they're all data workers. So they all sit within Databricks, building out analytics, reporting, machine learning, and AI. And of course, that's all needs sophisticated data governance, which we're going to talk about today. But I'm going to use this as my example data set. This is from our Australian energy market operator, AEMO, and it really sets the scene for what I find is kind of exciting data in the trading space. So this is the electricity actuals and forecast for New South Wales from a few days ago. But what you see on the chart is the current spot price for electricity in New South Wales, the demand, and then the future forecast for what that's going to be predicted for the next period. And we trade at 5-minute intervals in Australia. So that means our spot traders every 5 minutes are making a decision about whether they want to sell power, maybe buy power and put it into our large-scale batteries, and different arbitrage scenarios around that as well. And of course, our customers want to look at controlling their costs and have fixed contracts. So it's an incredibly interesting space. I'm jealous of the Texas Rangers presentation. I would love to see how Jeannie is going to play a part in our role in trading. I really love that concept. And I'm sure many of the people in the room have given this a go, which is using a large language model to ask it a question of your data. And this was harped on through the keynote this morning. And of course, it doesn't work without some form of context. So it's got to be able to understand your data, be able to connect with it. And for me, this is the key driver for how we can get data governance implemented in an organization. We know everybody wants to see a Genie, this ability to naturally query your data, but unless you've got all the right data governance in place, this isn't going to be possible. And we did a little proof of concept and we said, what would it take to give the right context to this is GPT-4, to be able to deliver that example of that graph. So this complicated graph from AEMO, how could we ask for that in a natural language, and be able to generate the Spark code to be able to query the data and show it. And so basically what this showed us was the promise, but then we figured out what are all the elements that we need to be able to provide to these large language models. And they're rich metadata, the right security levels. In fact, all the elements that we'll talk through for data governance today. So hopefully that is the kind of the driver and potentially a catalyst for why we might be able to get this achieved. And I'm pretty keen to run you through the topics today. So to begin with, this is hard. Maybe I'll get a show of hands. Who's implemented a data strategy in their organisation? Maybe keep your hand up if you agree that it's actually really hard to implement your data strategy. So maybe take a look around and we see that we're not alone. This is the benefit of one of these conferences. Don't just listen to me, but talk to your other colleagues, other people in the industry about this foundational piece. We're all very keen to deliver value on top of our data in the form of analytics and AI, but actually we all need to get the data governance pieces correct. For me, I break it down to 3 reasons why this is so hard. I've implemented a number of these over the last decade, but the 3 things I put it down to is that the people are really busy. Their job, in my case, is to trade. So to get the right time from them to contribute to data governance is really hard. It's often seen as just a nice to have rather than something essential. And the key lesson for me is to then have tangible goals and a reason for these really busy people to be able to do this work and be able to deliver it for the organisation. So this is an example of a data strategy, and I'm actually hoping this is something that gives a couple of different tips for people in the audience. So on the left-hand side is the typical pillars of a data strategy, and these have evolved over the last, over the last decade. But generally, these are the different categories, and we could spend a whole talk diving into an actual data strategy. But what I wanted to share was my core lesson from these, which is taking a phased approach. And if there was one thing that I would take away from this session, it's this piece here, which is starting small. And this has been the real winner for us. My very first data strategy, fantastic. Let's hit up every single one of these pillars. Let's try to deliver this in one go, big bang for the business. It's impossible. Our latest implementation, we started small, got that foundation right, got that buy-in with the business, produced an element of each of these, but actually at the smallest possible scale. And then our strategy was this piece. So our strategy said, let's do it as a phased approach. And then our plan was then broken up into these 3 phases. And so if you think about this foundational piece around let's just deliver, in my case, 6 data products, that means I only need to connect the data into the platform for those 6 user cases. Let's build 1 machine model. I want to build 20, but let's just start with 1 and get those foundations right. So the solution that we put in place for our latest implementation at trading, which has been hugely successful, focused on that immediate value. It focused on having really good tools, and I think everybody at this conference is finding those tools within Databricks and the ecosystem around it. And then fundamentally, having those 6 user cases owned by the business from the very beginning. Absolutely foundational. So as I said, we started really small. I literally started in Australia with our trading team with 6 people. And we chose 6 data products which would add real value, 1 person per data product. And we connected about 300 data sets for them, most of them from that AMO site that I showed for the power trading. It absolutely blew me away, the Databricks Lakehouse platform, how quickly that was adopted by the business. I was expecting this to scale to maybe 20, 30, 40 people in the first year, and we ended up with 120 across the business and some IT support, build in some 20 data products by the end of the first year. So we went live in January 2023, as this was the end of last year. So for us in Australia, this has been a really good success story. But as you saw on that map, we've got trading assets around the world. So this now becomes the pattern that we can then share with our trading asset in the US, in Europe and throughout Asia. And they can replicate this pattern to the 800 users in trading. And of course, it becomes a success story and a platform for all of the other areas of Shell to follow. We concentrated on giving them really high quality tooling. And this involved using Databricks Unity Catalog. And I'll show you a couple of actual live examples of what that looks like. GitHub. So we use GitHub for all of our code and CI/CD, and it's a great experience inside Databricks. And then in terms of our visualizations, we went live with making use of the dashboards within Databricks, PowerBI, which was already established within Shell, and actually the direct query works quite well with Databricks. And then for more advanced apps built by the traders, we use Plotly Dash. And that combination of tools was perfect for us to get this off the ground. As I mentioned, we provided value from the beginning, and the biggest value that the traders found was simply being able to connect to their data. So actually just unlocking all of these silos of data into one place and not having to find out what the username password was, but instead have that properly secured and governed. So that biggest win was simply those 6 people being able to just get access to those 300 data sets securely and be able to spend their time actually building their analytics. We also strategically chose to give them, each of those teams, very good high quality compute. So we didn't focus on costs initially. What I wanted was to be able to give them an incredible experience and also outperform what they had before. So their Jupyter notebooks on their quite beefy laptops that they had, Excel, let's replace that with a really decent cluster that they can now schedule their jobs and run and see even better performance. And then lastly, I was amazed that the business adopted GitHub as a way to collaborate on code. And I think that's a testament of how well that integration works with Databricks. I talked a lot about the agile approach and that phased, starting small, incrementing. So why don't I actually show you this, give you a little bit of a glimpse of what we have. So when we talk about a data product, it's not just the piece of data. I see it as that combination of tools, which I've just spoken about. And so that is giving our business that basically a schema inside Databricks that you're familiar with. That gives them the ability to do their structured data, use volumes for unstructured data, have their models, and now some of these future capabilities, and then combine that with a GitHub repository, a workspace for alerts, and their own dedicated clusters, including for machine learning. So let's have a demonstration of what that looks like for the business. So we're going to make the curated Data and Analytics Summit cluster that's in place. So what I've got here is just a shared cluster. So each data product just has a nice, decent, high-performance cluster dedicated. And then in our catalog, I'm in the test environment, you get a schema. So I've created a blank schema here, and it's all secured using the Azure Entra ID. So we manage the security at a group level, and then the owners of the groups can add their users in. As I mentioned, we do everything in GitHub. I'm just going to use an existing training GitHub example. And this is, if you haven't seen it, you don't actually have to visit GitHub. Everything you do is built into this experience. So in here, we're going to create a new notebook and go and access some of that AMO data that we saw and just do a basic example of like what the experience would be for a trader. So we can create a data frame. We're going to connect to that AMO data source. This dispatch price table gives us for each state in Australia every 5 minutes what the price was historically. So it's a good example public data set to show. And of course, in here, we can paste in whatever function. So today, we're going to create a 2-hour rolling average of that price. So that's kind of an example of what you might do in Spark. And so we've got the original data set, and we've appended a column which is producing the 2-hour rolling average. And then our final step would be that we want to share this with the rest of the organization. So in this case, I'm just going to write this out as a table into that curated DAS data product. But of course, ideally, you'd want this to be a materialized view or some sort of incremental update in the job. But as an example, hopefully this shows how we can collect data from the Lakehouse and be able to add some value to it and be able to publish that into our data product. So if we go and hit refresh in Unity Catalog, we can now see that we've created this dispatch price table. And what's neat is that all the comments from that source automatically come across. So all those existing columns that we had, if we had metadata already populated, it would come across, and we can see that we've got that latest sort of 10,000 records. And maybe the completion of this is we put together a nice little dashboard, probably not as fancy as the AMO dashboard, but maybe just show that rolling average. And so the team might want to do this in Power BI or Dash, but for the moment we can do a simple example within Databricks itself and share. So we can add filters. I'm sure you've all seen this demonstration before. So in this case, we might filter to the region, which is New South Wales, and maybe look at a particular time frame. So we found this a very agile, very quick experience for the business, being able to mock these up very quickly, knowing that everybody in trading has access to Databricks. It's all accessible through a web browser. And I got a good example of a particular day. So it's date range picker, a particular day on June 9th in the data set that I've got in this test environment. So let's visualize that, give ourselves a bit more space and visualize that as a nice chart, just to finish off the demonstration. And what's interesting about this particular day was it was very sunny in Australia. So we actually had a large amount of solar renewables. And when we look at the price per minute on that day, and we look at that new field that we added, which is the rolling average, what we can actually see is the typical kind of duck peak of expensive power in the evenings, but actually the power went negative during the middle of the day. It's quite, as I said, it's quite an interesting data set around power in Australia. So we've been able to collect data, add some value to it, produce a dashboard, share that with the business. And then because of the ecosystem of Unity Catalog, that now means that we have this product here. We get automatic lineage. So the question you ask, where did that data come from? We're able to see that AMO dispatch price has created this table. You can see who the owners are on the screen. So this is incredibly powerful that this is just built into the system for anything the traders are building. And then finally, within the interface, they can be adding tags or comments for the product itself or the individual columns. And we'll come back to this. You'll notice a few of these are empty. And we'll come back to that example of trying to get people to actually fill out decent descriptions and comments towards the end. And I think there's a big opportunity with generative AI to help in this space. So you can kind of imagine you've got much more complicated products than that, delivered by initially 6 people. You've grown that to 20 in Australia. We scale that out across the different trading assets across the world, and we go into other areas within our big organization. How do we govern? How do we share? How do we collaborate? How do we stop there being duplication? And I'm a big believer, and we're a big believer in the concept of data mesh. And again, this could be a whole talk in itself, But the core takeaways from this is data is a product. So what you just saw, so that for us, that's that schema, backed by source control, the analytics, wrapping that up with an owner. Then the ability for the whole organization to be able to do this on a common platform. So as IT, we deliver the Databricks, we connect the source data, but we let the business innovate and own their data products. And then a shared governance across the whole organization about how they can then share and collaborate. When I talk about governance, it's those items, at the foundations, that's around having an owner, but then having a common way to find the data. So the three biggest questions people ask for from data governance, the first one is they just want to be able to find the data that's already in their organization. So having that data catalog and that unified catalog across all these different data products as a data mesh means that people can find the data, stop duplication. And the concept of a data mesh is that I could have a risk team produce a risk model. Then I can have a trading team be able to just connect to that, make use of the output of that risk model and maybe produce a trading product. And then we might have a commercial team plug into that product across a number of different assets. And what we see with the combination of Unity Catalog, Delta sharing, is that we can govern that at a region, and then we can securely share that across the globe as well. The next two questions that everybody asks from data governance once they found their data is if I've produced a data product, who's using my product? And the data lineage piece has been amazing for that. So you might publish your product, so it might be a nice risk model that's produced, and you can literally click on the lineage and see all the people in the business that are now making use of it. And for me, this is kind of core to being a data product owner. You want to actually see your product getting used. You want to see the value in the business of people making use of it. And that built-in lineage is just incredible for that. The second piece for lineage, which is quite good from a support perspective, is that we built that dashboard. So we built this beautiful, very simple dashboard with our rolling average. Where did that data come from? You can imagine more complicated scenarios where that data has come from a number of data products that come from other data products that come from some of our core data. And so again, that's the flip side of that lineage component. And the fact that we just get this built in, if you're using the ecosystem, is just fantastic tooling. And then lastly, the keys around that security. So I think I mentioned it. We use the Azure security group, so Entra ID. And the benefit of that is from a platform perspective, we can secure everything by a group. So we can say who should have read access to the data, the owners can write to it. But then that's consistent across that whole platform. So we can share to a different group, then we can manage join and move a lever scenarios in those groups. And we're not dealing with tens of thousands or 100,000 people. We're really dealing with each kind of team or logical group that comes in place. So that's foundational components for data mesh. Brilliant. So the top lessons that I want to share with you is, and I think we heard this in another keynote, it was referring to AI and jumping on the train, is that you need to be able to deliver this very quickly and jump on board that train. And if we want to deliver that for AI, we also need to deliver the data governance pieces. So the landscape is constantly changing. For those, we're all probably using Databricks today. So we know that every month we get new features. If we're constantly waiting for everything to be perfect, we'll never get started. So having a strategy that allows us to pull in these components and make use of them, focus on value, so be able to get those initial 3 or 4 or 5 wins. Maybe it's only for a handful of people, but what happens is you spread by word of mouth. If somebody has a really good success story on a data platform, they'll tell the trader next to them and they'll want to be in as well. So really focusing on that value. And my last one is essentially giving people in our business superpowers. And come back to that first slide, that ability to potentially use generative AI to really accelerate what they do in their business. So I wanted to show you another example. And I know people who use Lakehouse IQ have this functionality built into Databricks. We did a workshop with Databricks and we looked at how do we generate those descriptions on our schemas, on our tables, and on our columns using our context. So in trading, there's some very specific acronyms, some very specific context that needs to be delivered. And out of the box, the solution wasn't great to begin with. It will improve. I think these capabilities within Databricks will improve, learn about your data, but actually you don't have to wait. So what I want to show is an example of how we can tie in to generative AI to help populate that data catalog. We use a tool internally just to provide governance over our LLM models. So it's called Shelley. You saw the website. And this is just a Python helper that wraps, in this case, GPT-4o. And so as an example, I can do anything. I can just ask what its capabilities are, and it'll give me a response. So you can think of this like OpenAI, but governed within Shell. So this is an example of how we can create really high quality descriptions at our schema level for our data products. And what we do is we have a very quick interview with the product owner. So in describing their own words, what their product does, and we're using simple prompt engineering. So we provide a reference example, a description, what all the tables are, the owner, and their content. And what's really neat within Unity Catalog is that you can access all of this information. So these information schemas allow us to retrieve all of the existing comments. And in this case, we can make a call out to OpenAI, pass that master prompt with all of the comments for our new data product that we created, that DAS example, execute that, and then generate a nicely formatted comment that comes across. And the idea here is that you wouldn't take this as is. We'll tag this as it was generated by metadata, and then the owner would have the permission to go and correct it. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but maybe it's 80% or 90% there, and our busy users can simply go and correct it and make an improvement. And tying that interview content in was the real winner for us. So let's take it to the next extreme, and that's, could we generate decent comments for every table and every comment within that data product? And so again, we've taken a prompt engineering approach, created a template with a number of different steps, and probably the innovative piece that we applied in here is to not just pass the names of the columns, but actually within this template, actually pass some of the data from each of those columns. So again, Unity Catalog, we can extract all the existing tags and comments. So in this case, I only want to update new comments. I don't want to override anything anybody else has already done. We can go and retrieve the description that we created in the first step. And then we can literally go and say for each data type, what's that extra context that we really care about? So for decimals, for numbers, maybe it's the range. For timestamps, maybe it's intervals. And then this one was really important. For strings, if it was less than, I think we moved that to 25, actually return the values on those string columns to the context. Lots of extra code to make this actually happen. If anybody knows how to update columns in bulk, please let me know. I'm having to loop through and update the comment per column. Might be some feedback to the team for that, but we're able to go and update any columns that are missing and the overall description for each of the tables. And you may have spotted we even have a validation step in there where we ask the LLM, is this even a good comment? And if it's not above 8 out of 10, let's not even bother to update it. So we go back to the example, and the astute people may notice that a bunch of the null columns now have a metadata AI tag and a filled-in comment ready for review by the owner. But if we go across to that, to the example with the rolling average, let's have a look at our new field that we've created. it's not bad, right? So it's been able to generate that this is a rolling 2-hour average of the regional reference price ranging from negative $47 through to $16,000. And of course, the owner can go in here and correct that. And really those busy users, which I talked about, our number one problem, everyone's super busy, they look at this and it's now a small job. It's not a big, empty database of no comments at all. It's a reasonable quality comment they can go through and correct. Add a little piece, did we get these components correct? And now I know there's some capabilities built into Databricks that many of you may be using. But I guess the key here is you've got the capabilities within this platform being open to be able to add your own intelligence to this as well and update it. So for me, this is about giving those people in the business those extra superpowers using AI on the platform itself. So my key takeaways, how does this scale across a diverse organization? And I think the key here is that data mesh concept. So the idea that we can empower that first user case and have it be able to organically grow, have the ownership of the person who understands the data and give them the right tooling, well governed within the platform. Where do you begin? Probably said this 10 times, start really small. So begin straight away. Work out your strategy, but I recommend a phased approach where you start small and start quickly for this to evolve. And finally, and I think we saw it again in the keynotes, is that I think critically, the generative AI boom that we have is the critical trigger for why the business is going to want to get this data governance right. I think we can really ride that wave and say, if you want to get these deliveries, let's use these really smart tools and actually get this done for the business. So with that, I hope you got a good couple of tips, and I think I'm out of time. I hope you all got a good couple of lessons, good examples. Thank you very much. Have a great summer.